and Stacey Ross.
All right, we've been talking about CBA negotiations for most of the day, and when it comes to understanding some of the finer points of it, it makes more sense once in a while to ask someone who's on either side. Well, how about a player? Paul Sewald, Mariners reliever, joins us now on the Emerald Queen Casino Sportsbook Hotline. And Paul, we appreciate you joining us between nap times for your 6-month-old. How's life treating you right now?
Life is great. It couldn't be better other than the baseball factor, but the family factor, it could not be better.
That's fantastic. And congratulations from all of us, by the way. So I'm going to start with the baseball factor by also reminding anyone listening. I've been encouraging you guys, if you have any questions for Paul where you're like, hey, this is something I don't really understand, and I haven't asked my friends, but I'd like to kind of get an answer on it that's easy for me to understand, send that in 206-421-3776. And Paul, I'll start with this, and it's the biggest question. There seems to be clearly some big sticking points on either side where it feels like either side is unwilling to budge. What to players are some of the most critical things that really matter to you guys?
Yeah, to try and put it as easy, obviously, when you talk about labor negotiations, nothing's easy. But to put it as simply as I can, the most important things that we're looking for would be, first and foremost, would be to raise the minimum salary for players from 0 to 3 years of service time. One of the craziest fact that I've heard about this is that 46% of people that played last year had less than 1 year of service time, and 53% of players that played last year made less than $500,000. Now, I'm not comparing $500,000 to other jobs. I want to get that out of the way very clearly. But when you're talking about billionaire owners and you quote-unquote millionaire players, over half the players in the league didn't make $500,000. So that mantra of this is billionaires versus millionaires is very untrue, unfortunately. And, I mean, just to put it personally, this is going to be my 6th season in the major leagues next year. That will be the first time that I've made over $1 million. So that billionaires versus millionaires is not necessarily true. And we want to make sure that we get the players that are being utilized from 0 to 3 years a little bit extra cushion in their salary. And teams are using those players to their advantage, optioning here, bringing back up another guy, and just, manipulating service time because it's like, oh, we can just, we're only paying these guys this, we can figure that out. If we can get a little bit of a bump, maybe we can get more guys the opportunity to stay when they get to the major leagues instead of, going back and forth. So that would be the most important thing, I would say. Another thing would be just the competitive integrity of the league. It's very disappointing for fans to buy season tickets to go to games when you know that their owner, their general manager are not putting out the best product they possibly can because they want to, we'll use the word tank for a couple of years so they can get a top 5 draft pick and they can accumulate these draft picks and they get the revenue sharing, but they're not spending it on their team and they can really make a lot of money so they could quote unquote make a splash when they have to. Well, that doesn't really always work. And next thing you know, you haven't put a decent team on the field for 5-6 years. And we want to fix that. We want to make sure that fans that buy season tickets know that not everyone has the ability to spend $250 million on their payroll, but we definitely think that all owners can spend a little bit of money and try and make sure that they get you players that are exciting to go watch and feel like they're trying to win games. Because as a fan, all you want is your team to win. And you want to make sure that if you're a fan of the team, that their owner also wants them to win. That seems pretty fair in our opinion. And then the last thing would be kind of service time manipulation. It's very difficult to see top players who should be in the major leagues not be, simply because a team can control them for an extra year. Chris Bryant is a very good friend of mine. He is probably the most clear-cut example of this. He was the minor league player of the year in 2014. He was ready for the major leagues. He would hit 500 in spring training. He had a home run like every other game. He was ready, but they called him up because he needed a little bit of seasoning. 3 weeks seasoning, and now all of a sudden he's in the big leagues. That's really all it took. Oh, now you get him for 7 years instead of 6 years, and now you get an extra year of control over a player. And it's frustrating because, the players or the fans want to see the best players out there on the field. It shouldn't be a service time argument. Now, in a personal situation, if we had Logan Gilbert and Jared Kelenic from opening day, are we 2 games better and maybe we make the playoffs? I don't know. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just saying if we weren't looking at service time manipulation, could they make an impact where you finish 1 game back, 2 games back, and you maybe could have made the playoffs? That's disappointing.
You know, Paul, one of the other things that has been disappointing is seeing, over the last week or two, basically negotiations stop altogether. How surprising was that for you as the players' union to see that you guys were starting to get at the table? There were some compromises that were going on, and then all of a sudden the owners pretty much effectively shut all of that down.
Since the last CBA in 2016, owners have had it pretty good. They have not spent nearly the amount of money that they were previous CBAs, and yet their revenues were going way up. So that's obviously a huge concern. And so we feel like we have to get the ball rolling and get this thing going. And they're very stagnant because why would they want anything different? Things have been great for them. So it's been a little bit frustrating. It feels like it's one-sided where we want to be at spring training next week and we want March 31st opening day to be here, and they don't seem to be feeling the same sort of sense of urgency, unfortunately. When Rob Manfred sent that letter to baseball fans on December 2nd, that he said, we think the lockout will jumpstart negotiations, and then it took 43 days for Major League Baseball and the owners to reach out to the PA. That doesn't really seem like jumpstarting to me. That seems like stalling until players feel the panic of, hey, I'm not getting a paycheck. We need to settle for whatever we can.
Question from a listener. First of all, this listener says, Paul, please tell Chris Bryant hello, hey, what's up, from every Mariners fan. But also, they wanted to talk about arbitration. They said, I don't really understand why it's such a big sticking point. Can you explain why that's a big focus for players?
Yes. So here's what arbitration is. Currently, players from 0 to 3 years of service time have a set minimum salary. They cannot make more than that, other than maybe a couple of $1,000 based off of performance. So you're stuck with that. Now we're talking about you have 6 years of service time and you become a free agent and you can go to the open market and you can go wherever you want. Well, the problem is teams are underpaying players from 0 to 3 years for their value, and then they're underpaying players with 6 years and over because they say they're past their prime. We don't want to pay them what they think they're worth, because they're not going to meet the same standards they met the first 6 years of their career. So from 0 to 3, you're underpaid. From 6+, you're underpaid because they don't think that you're going to perform. So you have from 3, 4, 5, 6, or essentially 3 years, your 3 years of arbitration, where the team's not in charge of your salary, it's an arbitrator. So that's where you get the most fair value for what you represent to the team and to baseball. So the important part is getting players to salary arbitration where teams cannot manipulate how much you make. That's why salary arbitration is so important. We would love to get salary arbitration back to 2 years. It used to be like that in the 70s and 80s. We gave that up in a few CBAs trying to move the needle in other sort of situations. But now the teams are manipulating service time and keeping guys from getting to arbitration for so long. We feel like it's very important that if you're not going to pay players past their prime, we need to pay them earlier when they deserve to be paid for their value.
Paul, there was conversation about a pool of money being put aside for players that are, the top performers in the league that are going through that arbitration or are going through essentially, for a lack of a better term, their rookie contract. They're not being able to hit free agency. Why is that such a big deal for the players' union, and is that the best path forward that you guys see as a compromise potentially with the owners?
So to clarify on the bonus pool, this is pre-arbitration. So once you get to arbitration, you are not a part of this player bonus pool. So this would be, as of now, players from 0 to 3 years of service time who have not reached arbitration would be eligible to receive from this pool. What it's saying is, Aaron Judge in 2017 was a rookie. He had 50 homers. His WAR was through the roof. He deserved, based off of his WAR, he was a $30 million player. He made $500,000 because he was on the minimum. He deserves to be compensated for being an outrageously amazing player for this season. That seems appropriate. He brought it to the team. I think we all can figure that seems appropriate. You deserve to be paid what you added to the team. A middle reliever maybe that has a WAR of 0.1 is not going to get as much of that bonus pool as Aaron Judge would or Pete Alonso did in their rookie year, which seems totally fair. Now, when you talk about the amount of that bonus pool, we are looking at $100 million. Major League Baseball is looking at 10. Obviously, drastic difference. If you're talking 30 major league teams, $100 million, that means you're dividing $3.3 million per team. That's all we're talking about, $3.3 million per team. If you can't pay Aaron Judge, who's the rookie of the year, an extra $1.5 million, $2 million for hitting 53 home runs, you don't deserve to own a team. Just to put it bluntly, like if that value doesn't bring back $2 million, you're doing something wrong as an owner, and that's what we see. When you talk about $10 million versus $300,000, that's all you're going to give the rookie of the year as a bonus. It's ridiculous.
It is. A text from a listener, Jonathan in Poulsbo, says, "Can Paul take care of my tax return for me?" Sounds like you've got a good handle on it.
I have not done accounting in, let's see, I got my degree in 2012, so I'd say 10 years have gone since I could have done a tax return, so I apologize, Jonathan, I cannot.
Don't remind me that 2012 was 10 years ago. I can't think about it. Paul, by far, the most common question on the text line right now, it's like every other question. I'm just going to ask it. Why didn't players agree to mediation?
So many of the listeners are probably too young to realize that in 94, 95, President Clinton ordered a mediator for conversations between the Players Association and Major League owners during their strike. It doesn't work. We don't need a mediator. We just need to talk. Major League Baseball is not coming to the table to negotiate. We don't need a third party in between us to decipher, well, Rob Manfred said this, so you guys should do that. No. Just call us and tell us this is our proposal. Take it or leave it. We come back with a counter. We don't need somebody in the middle. We don't need a third party. Anyone who's played a game of telephone with their friends in middle school, where it's like, Julie likes you. Do you like her? No. Just talk to the person that you like. Just talk to the person you're fighting with. You don't need a mediator. That seems ridiculous. And for people who are asking, that's your tax dollars that we saved, in case you were wondering. That was a government employee that you're now not going to pay just to be a middleman between us and the owners.
Very well put. Paul, before we let you go, man, we really appreciate you coming on and explaining some of this and putting it in a very, very clear way for everybody. I don't think anybody can misconstrue or miss what you have said, and we really appreciate you taking the time. But I would be remiss if I didn't notice, and everybody else noticed, how you said you're very close friends with Chris Bryant. We just all want to know, Paul, we feel like you are, the ambassador for the Mariners here. How active have you been in terms of,
are you asking
just
to
letting
put in a
everybody
word?
know how awesome it is to come play next to you, right? Like, who cares about, the Mariners? Just how awesome it is to play next to you and what an opportunity that would be.
I know Mariners fans are listening very closely at this point. I convinced him to go to University of San Diego with me and play with me there. I am doing the best that I possibly can to get him to be a Seattle Mariner for the next few years.
Let's go, Paul.
Now, I'm not in charge of how much money he gets or what deal he takes, but I promise, speaking of middleman, I am doing my best to be a middleman between him and the front office.
We're just coordinating with Paul for Paul, what's the latest with the CBA? And also Chris Bryant, our correspondent in the field. All right, he is Mariners reliever Paul Sewald. Paul, thank you so much. It's been such an engaged text line. I think this is exactly what listeners needed to hear, was just for someone to explain stuff that we're trying to talk about, but in reality, a lot of us still had a lot of questions about it, and you did an amazing job breaking it down, and I got to say, I know I'm speaking for Jake, that we loved your answer on Chris Bryant. So thank you so much for joining us, man. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, guys. I think all of us players and the union want to get our message across, because anyone who reads things on Twitter from AP News, or I'll not mention other names of people, that's an MLB agenda. I tried to give it as clearly as possible. This is what we're fighting for. This is what Major League Baseball is talking about, but not negotiating. And hopefully we get a deal sooner rather than later. All of us just want to get to spring training, and we want to get up to Seattle, and we want to get the season started because it's going to be a great season. We just want to bring the value that we feel that we give to these major league teams. And I understand that it's frustrating for the fans, and there are no winners or losers in a situation like that for the fans. But I just want to say, this is my message to fans. If you have the opportunity to fight for your own working conditions, would you fight for your own working conditions? That's essentially what we're doing. And it doesn't matter how much money we make or what we do for a living. We get to play a game. But if you got to fight for your working conditions, I would think that you would as well. And that's essentially what we're doing.
Well said, Paul. Thank you again so much.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Thanks for having
we really
me, guys. I
appreciate it, man.